Hi, everyone. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. May not be morning for you, but it's morning for us.
And it's the day after Easter.
Yes, it's Monday the 21st, as we record this. Not sure when you'll be watching it, but happy Easter to everyone who's watching it.
Happy spring, happy new beginnings. We had a really interesting session, number 54. A letter from KH to A.O. Hume, basically telling him that there didn't seem to be any reason to continue the correspondence with him. Hume wanted to argue. He wanted to debate every single thing that they tried to teach him because he was convinced he was smarter. And he could come up with theories about how life worked just as well as they could. They were all just theories, after all. So KH said, either we know something or we don't. You're not going to convince me that we are wrong, our tradition, and our learning that has taken thousands and thousands of years to accumulate. I'm not going to throw that out in favor of one of your theories. And Hume isn't willing to do that. He wants a debate. He wants to be on top. He wants to control them. So KH, basically, he said, there's really no reason to continue this. You say you want to learn, but you really don't want to learn. You want to teach instead. And
His cup is full. There's no room.
And he said that. He said, your brain is too full of information and whatever you put into your brain. There isn't a bit of room for anything new. So that's where we left it last time. Now, let's switch topics here. We've been talking about the visit that HPB is about to make to the Mahatmas. Remember that they told her to go to Darjeeling, which is in northern India, right near Tibet, and even to go farther, closer to the border of Tibet, which is in Sikkim Territory. And so that is where that meeting was going to take place, right near the border between India and Tibet. So now we have a letter from HPB to Mr. Sinnett. This was in October, so she had already been there for several days. And let's see what she has to say.
Do we know what specifically prompted the letter?
Yes, he wrote a letter to her.
He sent it to...
I don't know how he got it to her, but he did manage to get a message to her.
Okay, and this is taken from where, so our viewers know?
This is from the book, Letters from H.P. Blavatsky to A.P. Sinnett.
How did you know I was here? You seem to be surrounded by very gossiping friends.
Now, she's in Darjeeling at this point.
The fact is that I had not left Bombay in the greatest secrecy, even some theosophists who visit us believing me at home, but busy and invisible as usual. Had I not gone incognito, so to say, till I reached the hills and turned off the railway to enter Sikkim, I would have never been allowed to enter it unmolested, and would not have seen Morya and KH both in their bodies.
It's important to give a little bit of background here. They had told her several weeks before that they were going to bring her there, and they even sent one of their chelas to Bombay to accompany her. So she didn't notify the people around her because she knew what would happen. So she kept things secret, but as people are, there's a grapevine, a theosophical grapevine, and many theosophists figured it out and were anxious to accompany her. She told them they were not welcome. So she tried to leave without them knowing, but of course, many of them managed to get on the same train, but they had to make different changes along the route. And one by one, these people all got lost or left behind, sometimes in very funny situations. So that is what she's referring to here. The Mahatmas did not want all of this folderol. They wanted to see her and didn't need all of this distraction.
Lord, I would have been dead by this time. Oh, the blessed, blessed 2 days. It was like the old times when the bear paid me a visit.
And by bear, she means Morya. I assume that means back quite a few years before, when she was first being trained by the Mahatmas near that same area, I believe. And in a similar situation, she's going to describe the situation.
The same kind of wooden hut, a box divided into 3 compartments for rooms and standing in a jungle on 4 pelican's legs. The same yellow chelas gliding noiselessly. Yellow chelas?
Yeah, everyone in those days considered that Indians in America were red, Indians in Asia and all other Asians were yellow.
The Far East, Indian, really?
Yeah.
Yellow.
They considered them yellow.
I wonder if that was at all derogatory back then.
No, it was just descriptive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The same eternal gull, gull, gull sound of my boss's inextinguishable chelum pipe.
A hookah.
Okay, that's the bubbling of the water then.
Yeah.
Okay. The old familiar sweet voice of your KH, whose voice is still sweeter and face still thinner and more transparent.
So KH apparently has a very, very sweet voice to go with his very, very sweet demeanor. He's one of the kindest, most compassionate people anyone could ever hope to meet. And all of the chelas recognize that. He is just kindness personified.
When she says thin face, I wonder if that means physically narrow or if it means something else.
I don't know. He's obviously in very good form. The Mahatmas are not these obese, rotund, jowly figures that we see as the high muckety-mucks in religions who are living high on the hog and enjoying their beef and claret dinners every night. So, no, they are the epitome of humanity, of manhood. Mm-hmm. They are handsome. They are in good form physically.
The pinnacle of human health, really. That's how they live so long.
Perfect health.
We've mentioned this back in the beginnings of our sessions, but the only physical portrait or portraits we have of any of the masters, we're not sure if that's even real or not. So we really don't know what he looks like, unfortunately.
The ones that are most often portrayed were painted by an artist by the name of Schmeichen. Mm-hmm. And that was in London. When he painted those portraits, both HPB and Alcott were in London at the time, and she quite often visited his studio while he was painting. Mm. And her aura alone made a connection to where the Mahatmas could influence his painting. So I'm pretty sure that they're quite accurate.
The same entourage for furniture, skins and yak tail stuffed pillows and dishes for salt, tea, etc. Well, when I went to Darjeeling, sent away by them, out of reach of the chelas, who might fall in love with my beauty, said my polite boss. Wow. On the following day, I received the note I enclosed from the deputy commissioner warning me not to go to Tibet. He locked the stable door after the horse had already been out. She's calling herself the horse. She's already on her way, and he locked the stable door. She's funny, self-deprecating. Very luckily, because when the infernal 6 or 7 babus who stuck to me like parasites went to ask passes for Sikkim, they were refused point blank, and the Theosophical Society abused and jeered at.
So a few of them did manage to get to Darjeeling because they did know that she was going to end up there, but they weren't with her specifically.
But I had my revenge. I wrote to the deputy commissioner and told him that I had permission from government, the fact of government not answering for my safety being of little importance, since I would be safer in Tibet than in London.
And she didn't say which government, so she may have well meant the government of the hierarchy.
After all, I did go 20 or 30 miles beyond Sikkim Territory and remained there 2 days, and nothing bad happened to me, and there I was. Several ladies and gentlemen anxious to see the remarkable woman pester me to death with their visits, but I have refused persistently to see any of them.
She specifically made sure that she stayed very remote from all of these hangers-on who were trying to be part of this amazing adventure, because she needed to preserve her energy and protect it from the outer world. So she was kind of going through a repurification process in order to be in the presence of the Mahatmas.
These hangers-on were just attempting to go with her.
Right. They were anxious to visit the masters.
Yeah, of course. Let them be offended. What the devil do I care? I won't see anyone. I came here for our brothers and chelas, and the rest may go and be hanged. Dang, she's like very emotional. Thanks for your offer. I do mean to pay you a visit, but I cannot leave Darjeeling until boss goes away in a week or 10 days, and then I will leave Darjeeling. And if you permit me to wait for you at your house, I will do so with real pleasure.
So they had invited her. Remember, Sinnett knew that she was coming to Darjeeling, which is a little farther north and east from Simla. And they were on their way back to Allahabad, which is also on the way between Bombay and Darjeeling. So he said, we'll be back at our house in Allahabad, and we invite you to come and spend a couple of weeks. And she did. She took them up on the offer.
I have received via Bombay a long article by Mr. Hume, the most impudent and insulting I ever read. If he thinks I will print it, he may whistle for it. She's funny. I will send it to you tomorrow with my letter from him, as boss advises me to do. I'm very weak and must stop. Boss gives you his love. I saw him last night at the Lama's house.
Yeah. How's that? Boss, meaning Morya, sent you his love. I saw him last night.
Yours ever, HPB.
Yeah. All right. That is quite an interesting letter. And this was quite an interesting adventure, and we're not done yet.
Before we move on, though, I wanted to make sure our viewers were aware that this letter that we're reading from and the next letters that we'll read from are not in the Mahatma Letters book, as we mentioned. Not sure how many scholars or how many researchers or how many theosophists or spiritually interested people have put these together, like Terry's doing, and brought the letter that we just read into the Mahatma Letters teaching to help the teaching make more sense. So this is one more example of how we're connecting the dots, which may have been connected, but not sure if they ever have.
They have by various people. I'm not sure all of it has been assembled into one project. That I've never seen.
Certain people probably understand that the letter that we just read from the different book is in the same timeline, in the same universe, so to speak, as the Mahatma Letters. But right, it hasn't been presented and published in any way for others to understand and learn from like this. It's very cool.
Yeah, and this is from a different book, Letters from the Masters of Wisdom. So
this next letter is what you're saying.
Yeah.
The letter we're going into now. Yeah.
So we are going to read extracts from a letter from a chela. His name is S. Ramaswamier, and his guru was Morya also, but he was fairly new, only a few months, and he was somewhat clairvoyant, so they were able to communicate directly with him. And he had been told that he was not going to be able to see Morya very soon, but perhaps in a year or two he would be ready. But then they changed their mind, and he got a message, get on the train and go find HPB.
Oh.
So this letter was in October, I think October 7th it was dated, something like that, and the main event was on October 5th.
And we're still in the year 1882, and the letter is from this S. Ramaswamier to Damodar.
Right. And he'll mention why he's writing to Damodar.
And Damodar is another chela of Morya or KH? Or both?
He's KH is chela.
Okay.
And he's at Bombay working daily with HPB.
Extracts from a private letter to Damodar K. Mavalankar, Joint Recording Secretary of the Theosophical Society. One day in September last, while I was reading in my room, I was ordered by the audible voice of my blessed guru, Morya Maharishi, to leave all and proceed immediately to Bombay, whence I had to go in search of Madame Blavatsky, wherever I could find her, and follow her wherever she went.
Oh, yeah.
They're kind of summoning him.
Mm-hmm.
This is interesting.
So I don't know where he started out, but he had to first go to Bombay, and then we'll see what happens.
Without losing a moment, I closed up all my affairs and left the station, for the tones of that voice are to me the divinest sound in nature.
This chela, S. Ramaswamier, was a government worker in India and obviously was in charge of some kind of an office. And he said, as soon as I heard that voice, I closed up my affairs and did exactly what it told me to do.
Its commands imperative. I traveled in my ascetic robes. At Bombay, I found Madame Blavatsky gone and learned through you that she had left a few days before, that she was very ill, and that she had left the place very suddenly with a chela. Now I must tell you what happened to me after I left you.
Yeah, very interesting.
So he left Damodar.
Right. So he went to Bombay. Damodar said, I'm sorry, she's already left. She's gone.
We don't know which direction he went, but I guess he's going to
Well,
tell.
he knew where she was going, to Darjeeling, so he went the same direction.
Okay.
And this is hundreds of miles.
Mm-hmm. On reaching Allahabad, I heard the same well-known voice directing me to go to Berhampur. In the train, I met most providentially with some babus. I did not then know they were also theosophists, since I had never seen any of them.
Now, these were some of the hangers-on that were desperately trying to see the masters.
Okay. Who were also in search of Madame Blavatsky. Some had traced her to Dinapur, but lost her track and went back to Berhampur.
So, yeah, this whole adventure.
They're stalking her.
Crazy. Yeah, exactly. They're stalking her and the Mahatmas.
Oh my gosh. At last, they received from her a note. They meaning the hangers-on.
Mm-hmm.
She was to remain, she said, in the vicinity of Darjeeling and would see the brothers on the Sikkim Territory, where they would not be allowed to follow her, meaning the babus would not be allowed. Brother Nobin would not tell me where Madame Blavatsky was, or perhaps did not then know it himself.
And that's Nobin Banerjee. That is someone we have heard of before. He was one of the signers on the protest to the HX letter.
On the 23rd at last, I was brought by Nobin Babu from Calcutta to Chandernagore, where I found Madame Blavatsky ready to start 5 minutes after with the train. Wow.
Mm-hmm. So he did manage to catch up to her.
Mm-hmm. A tall, dark-looking, hairy chela told me that I had come too late, that Madame Blavatsky had already seen the Mahatmas, and that he had brought her back. He was now going to see her safe to the station and return. But that's not true.
Well, he'll explain it.
When the train arrived, she got into the carriage, upon entering which I found the chela.
So he got on the same train.
The hairy chela.
I'm assuming that's who he's referring to, but he got on the same train that HPB was on.
Okay, so I think he's naughty. He was trying to dissuade. Okay, I see what's happening.
Well, he was ordered by M to go.
No, Ramaswamier was, but the other guy told him she's already gone, bye, but then he gets on.
She had seen them once already, but Ramaswamier thought maybe there will be a second visit.
So she already actually had seen
Yes.
it? Oh, I thought this guy was lying to her.
No, I don't think he would have lied to them.
Okay, my mistake. When the train arrived, she got into the carriage, and before even her own things could be placed in the van, the train, against all regulations and before the bell was rung, started off, leaving Nobin Babu, the Bengalese, and her servant behind. Only one Babu and the wife and daughter of another, all theosophists and candidates for chelaship, had time to get in.
Yeah, so another strange happening that left several of these hangers-on behind.
Whoa, okay. I myself had barely the time to jump into the last carriage. All her things, with the exception of her box containing the theosophical correspondence, were left behind together with her servant. So not even her servant got on.
No, he didn't even make it on board.
Yet, even the persons that went by the same train with her did not reach Darjeeling. Babu Nobin Banerjee, with the servant, arrived 5 days later, and they who had time to take their seats were left 5 or 6 stations behind, owing to another unforeseen accident.
Mm-hmm. So all of these strange events happened to get rid of these people who were trying to see the masters.
Oh my gosh. It requires no great stretch of imagination to know that Madame Blavatsky had been, or was, perhaps, being again taken to the brothers, who, for some good reasons best known to them, did not want us to be following and watching her. Well, us, but he was summoned by the masters.
Right, but he's talking about the whole group in general.
The first days of her arrival, Madame Blavatsky was living at the house of a Bengali gentleman, a theosophist, was refusing to see anyone, and preparing, as I thought, to go again somewhere on the borders of Tibet. To all our importunities, we could get only this answer from her, that we had no business to stick and follow her, that she did not want us, and that she had no right to disturb the Mahatmas. In despair, I determined, come what may, to cross the frontier, which is about a dozen miles from here, and find the Mahatmas or die. I never stopped to think that what I was going to undertake would be regarded as the rash act of a lunatic.
Yeah, you have to stay tuned for the rest of this story here.
I'm still confused as to why she would go to see them, then go back, and then go back again.
Maybe they couldn't do all of the work they needed to do on her in one go. They needed 2 different visits. I don't know. I don't try to figure out their ways. They're inscrutable, mysterious.
When the master spoke to him, the sweet divine voice, saying, go find her and follow her, I still kind of think this other chela said, oh, she's already gone, because the chela wanted to follow and not, interesting. I was bent upon one engrossing idea, to find and see my guru. One morning, namely October 5th, I set out in search of the Mahatma. I had an umbrella and a pilgrim's staff for sole weapons. With a few rupees in my purse, I wore the yellow garb and cap. Whenever I was tired on the road, my costume easily procured for me, for a small sum, a pony to ride.
Now remember, Morya had suggested that he wear a traveler's outfit, and by that he meant like a pilgrim outfit. There were lots of religious pilgrimages to different shrines or to visit holy sites.
He called it an ascetic garb.
Right. But he said, because I was dressed in this garb of a pilgrim, a very devout person who was looking for spiritual enlightenment, everyone facilitated that.
I wonder if HPB knew that he was supposed to be following her.
He doesn't give any indication of that. It kind of sounds to me like the Mahatmas didn't advise her of that. They had enough things, they didn't need her worrying about anything
They're
else.
making it harder for him because she doesn't want him following
Well,
her.
they have something in mind.
That whole afternoon, I traveled on foot, penetrating further and further into the heart of the Sikkim Territory. I cannot now say how many miles I traveled before dusk, but I'm sure it was not less than 20 or 25 miles.
Now, remember, Sikkim is a very wild, lawless area. The British were not allowed to go there at all because it was dangerous.
Throughout, I saw nothing but impenetrable jungles and forests on all sides of me. At dusk, I began to search around me for a place to rest in at night. I met on the road in the afternoon a leopard and a wild cat. Fear or anxiety never once entered my mind. Perhaps in my heart there was room for no other feeling but an intense anxiety to find my guru. When it was just getting dark, I espied a solitary hut a few yards from the roadside. The rude door was locked. The cabin was untenanted at the time. I examined it on all sides and found an aperture on the western side.
So a window.
It was small indeed, but sufficient for me to jump through. It had a small shutter and a wooden bolt. By a strange coincidence, but probably not really, of circumstances, the hillman had forgotten to fasten it on the inside when he locked the door. Upon getting inside, I found the room communicated by a small doorway with another apartment, the two occupying the whole space of this sylvan mansion.
Mansion. Yeah. A cabin in the woods, in the jungle.
I lay down, concentrating my every thought upon my guru as usual, and soon fell into a profound sleep. Between 10 and 11, or perhaps a little later, I awoke and heard sounds of footsteps in the adjoining room.
Uh-oh.
Like this is 10 or 11 p.m., so he's only been sleeping for a couple of hours. I could plainly distinguish 2 or 3 people talking together in a dialect that to me was no better than gibberish. At any moment, they might have entered from the other room and murdered me for my money. Had they mistaken me for a burglar, the same fate awaited me. But my heart did not palpitate with fear, nor did I for one moment think of the possible tragical chances of the thing. I lay awake and staring into darkness for upwards of 2 hours, and even paced the room softly and slowly without making any noise, to see if I could make my escape in case of need back to the forest. I recomposed myself to rest. After a sound sleep, undisturbed by any dream, I woke and found it was just dawning. Then I hastily put on my boots and cautiously got out of the hut through the same window. I could hear the snoring of the owners of the hut in the other room. They didn't think to look in the other room?
No, they didn't. Wherever they had been, they came back and just went to sleep and didn't check the other room.
Oh my God.
They assumed the window had been locked.
But I lost no time and gained the path to Sikkim, the city. I thanked my revered guru for the protection he had vouchsafed me during the night. Of course, the masters are helping this whole thing happen.
Right.
Wow.
They're checking in on him every once in a while.
I mean, the train conductor, the owners not going into the room, the
Yeah.
masters are helping all this.
Yeah.
Sure.
And on the other hand, if they don't want somebody to find them, they have numerous avenues for making that happen too. One of them is they can create a barrier, an invisible shield. You could walk 3 feet away from them and never see them.
My gosh. When it became quite light, I wended my way on through the hills and dales. It was, I think, between 8 and 9 a.m., and I was following the road to the town of Sikkim, whence I was assured by the people I met on the road I could cross over to Tibet easily in my pilgrim's garb, when I suddenly saw a solitary horseman galloping toward me from the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, who's the horseman?
I wonder who it is.
Edge of my seat. From his tall stature and the expert way he managed the animal, I thought he was some military officer of the Sikkim Raja. Now, I thought, I am caught. I don't think so.
Let's see.
But as he approached me, he reined the steed. I looked at and recognized him with a capital H. Instantly, I was in the awful presence of him, of the same Mahatma, my own revered guru, whom I had seen before in his astral body on the balcony of the theosophical headquarters.
Yeah, so he knew what he looked like because he had appeared astrally to the whole group of people at Bombay.
The very same instant, Swami prostrated on the ground at his feet.
And this is what Asian chelas do. They revere the masters so highly that just the chance of having any kind of interaction with them is like a tremendous blessing, once in a lifetime. And yet the English people are just like, well, I'm not sure I believe in these guys. And if they do exist, they're probably just yogis, fakirs who have learned a few things.
We should also distinguish semantically between this type of prostration and deep reverence and respect versus worship. I know they're just words, but I wouldn't call it worshiping.
No.
It's deep reverence and respect, the utmost.
And they recognize what it took to get to that position of enlightenment. It has nothing to do with ego on either part. It's just devout recognition of a very holy, enlightened being.
They're not gods and they're not deities to be worshipped. It's just this deep understanding of the trials and the successes that they've had for humanity, that they've overcome. I arose at his command, and leisurely looking into his face, I forgot myself entirely in the contemplation of the image I knew so well, having seen his portrait, the one in Colonel Olcott's possession, a number of times. He was no myth, no creation of the imagination of a medium, as some skeptics suggested. I see him before me in flesh and blood, and he speaks to me in accents of kindness and gentleness. His complexion is not as fair as that of Mahatma Kuthumi, meaning he's darker skinned than Cage.
Yeah. Kuthumi looks very European as far as the fairness of his complexion, his features, everything. Morya obviously is a little bit darker skinned, but Morya is 6 feet 8 inches tall and the epitome of manhood.
But never have I seen a countenance so handsome, a stature so tall and so majestic. As in his portrait, he wears a short black beard and long black hair hanging down to his breast. He wore a yellow mantle lined with fur, and on his head, instead of a pagri, which is a turban, a yellow Tibetan felt cap.
The felt cap is quite prominent at that time. And even Damodar had one, even though he had never been to Tibet. He received a gift phenomenally from KH, and it was one of those Tibetan caps because KH quite often wore a similar one. So when Damodar received that cap, of course, that was a direct communication with KH, and he wore that constantly.
When the first moments of rapture and surprise were over, I had a long talk with him. He told me to go no further, for I would come to grief. He said I should wait patiently if I wanted to become an accepted chela, that many were those who offered themselves as candidates, but that only a very few were found worthy. None were rejected. None that asked to become probational chelas are rejected. Okay.
So, once again, this is confirmation that anybody, even today, that says, you know what, I want to be tested, I want to try out to be a chela, it's in their rules, apparently, that they have to give them a chance. So you are certainly welcome to say, you know what, I want to be one of those chelas, but most people will fail after only a couple of trials that they are put through because there is no warning as to when they will come, and it's usually only after the fact that you say, oh, was that a trial to see whether or not I was worthy?
None were rejected, but all of them tried, and most found to fail signally. The Mahatma I found speaks very little English and spoke to me in my mother tongue, Tamil. He told me that if the Chauhan permitted Madame Blavatsky to go to Parijong next year, then I could come with her.
That didn't end up happening, by the way.
Before he left me, 2 more men came on horseback, his attendants, I suppose. Wow, he has attendants living with him, huh?
Of course. They always have chelas. And imagine having that opportunity to live with the Mahatmas, to travel with them, to wait on them and help them in their work. What an incredible opportunity that would be. I would want to be one of their servants.
I wonder who they were, who they are. Hard to tell.
They're probably unknown ones. They probably stay completely away from the outer world.
Wow. They followed the Mahatma as he left at a gentle trot. For over an hour, I stood gazing at the place that he had just quitted, and then I slowly retraced my steps. So that was what Morya wanted. He wanted Ramaswamier to follow HPB, but not really be with her. Just follow her and go a little bit.
Right.
And then
so he had his
ride.
own adventure and his own experience, a private conversation with him.
And at that time, HPB was probably hanging out with KH or somewhere.
Not necessarily. She was somewhere a few miles away still.
Maybe traveling towards her destination still. We don't know.
No one knows, but we're going to find out the suite here.
My absence had seemingly alarmed Madame Blavatsky, but she wasn't even really aware. No, she must have been aware that he was.
That's why I don't think the Mahatmas advised her as to what was going on with Ramaswamier.
So she thought he was just missing from. Where did they start their journey? They were coming
Bombay, but she knew that he made it to Darjeeling.
Okay.
Because
there. But then he was missing from there. From
right,
Darjeeling.
and then he disappeared, and she was very concerned. They were in Sikkim Territory, remember?
Oh, right. She scolded me for my rash and mad attempt to try to go to Tibet after this fashion. When I entered the house, I found with Madame Blavatsky Babu Parbati Churn Roy and his assistant Babu Kanti Bhushan Sen, both members of our society. At their prayer and Madame Blavatsky's command, I recounted all that had happened to me, reserving, of course, my private conversation with the Mahatma. They were all, to say the least, astounded. Reserving meaning he didn't
hold back. Reserving meaning he didn't share that part.
But he said that he talked to him.
Right. The rest was personal information that he had no need to share.
Okay, so he met back up with HPB.
Yeah, he did.
I write to you this letter, my dearest brother, in order to show you how right we were in protesting against A.O. Hume's HX letter, the Theosophist.
S. Ramaswamier was one of the signers of that protest letter. And that probably helped him gain this opportunity.
Morya rode out, who knows how long, to meet him privately in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And now that I have seen the Mahatma in the flesh and heard his living voice, let no one dare say to me that the brothers do not exist. S. Ramaswamier, FTS, Darjeeling, October 7th, 1882.
So one more testimony that, yes, they do exist. Yes, they are exactly who they say they are. And S. Ramaswamier is one of the few that seems to have succeeded. There's no indication that he ever failed. So again, like Damodar, he was very focused and very intent on becoming an accepted chela and moving forward.
And we're not sure of any others besides these two, really, Damodar and Ramaswamier.
We don't have a follow-up on many of the others. Some of them, the Asian chelas, were brought either into Tibet or to closer areas where they could be interacted with more easily. But then at the same time, that meant that they had to leave the outer world and become more secluded. All right, so there we have another exciting episode.
Wow.
Now let's have another exciting episode here. Now this third letter is not one that's in the numbered letters, but it is a letter from KH to A.O. Hume, dated around September 1882.
When we introduced this session, though, we were recounting last session's letter where KH says to Hume, there's no point in even continuing this.
Right, and that was letter number 90, so that is all correct.
And then this comes after.
This is after that letter saying, you know what, I don't see any reason to continue. But it's got some really good information, so let's read it.
KH decided there was a little bit more that needed to be discussed, I guess.
I'm not sure how we have a copy of this. I forgot to check, because it was sent to A.O. Hume, and most of those letters have been lost. But somehow, I guess Sinnett got a copy of it, and for whatever reason, we do have a copy of the letter.
My dear brother, I have to apologize for the delay in answering several of your letters. So even after that last letter, Hume must have fired back a few responses.
Oh, he probably did. He can't keep his mouth shut or his pen quiet.
And it seems like KH is willing to interact
Well,
still.
we're going to see what he has to say.
I have to apologize for the delay in answering several of your letters. I was greatly occupied with business entirely foreign to occult matters, which had to be transacted in the usual dry, matter-of-fact way. Moreover, I do not find much to answer in your letter.
Yeah.
In the first, you notify me of your intention of studying Advaita philosophy with a good old Swami. The man, no doubt, is very good, but from what I gather in your letter, if he teaches you anything except an impersonal, non-thinking, and non-intelligent principle they call Parabrahm, then he will not be teaching you the true spirit of that philosophy, not from its esoteric aspect at any rate. Now, do we know who this good old Swami is?
They refer to him as the Swami of Almora, and he's a self-appointed Swami who I believe at one point had some degree of enlightenment, but then became very full of himself and the number of followers that he was attracting. And as so often happens, it makes them kind of deviate from their spiritual path somewhat. But remember that Hume kept saying, look, if you guys aren't going to teach me anything, I'm going to find some other teacher who will teach me how to do this phenomena. So now he thinks he's found that teacher.
However, this is no business of mine. You are, of course, at liberty to try and learn something, since it seems that we could teach you nothing. Wow.
And that's the absolute truth.
But since two professors of two different schools, like the two proverbial cooks in the matter of sauce, oh my gosh, can only result in making confusion still more confusing, I think I'd better retire from the field of competition altogether. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Here comes the Dear John letter. Dear Alan.
Gosh. Or at least until you think you're in a better position to understand and appreciate our teachings as you express it. So, we are held by some persons as no better than refined or cultured tantrikas. Wow.
So, obviously, this is something that Hume wrote to him, that, there are some people that just think that you're a little bit higher grade of tantrika.
Wow. Well, we ought to feel grateful for the prefixed adjective. Oh my God.
Meaning cultured.
Yeah, okay. Instead of just tantrikas. They're cultured tantrikas.
Right.
Gosh.
That makes a difference.
Well, we ought to feel grateful for the prefixed adjective, since it would have been easy for our would-be biographers to call us unrefined tantrikas. And a tantrika is somebody who practices tantra, the school of tantra. Moreover, the easy way with which you notify us of the comparison made makes me feel confident of the fact that you know little, if anything, about the professors of that sect.
Now, remember, Tantra at that time had a really bad reputation, and it still does to a large extent. Originally, it was a group of yoga students who practiced sex magic, and that was their main goal. So raising Kundalini and using that to obtain personal desires was what Tantra was all about in 1882. It did not have a good reputation.
Those are the left-handed practices. There are right-handed practices as well, but the left hand, the more sensational practices get all the press, and that's what people knew about. There were certainly right-handed practices that were selfless, but those were not as exciting for people.
The Mahatmas used exactly the same energy techniques, but not for any personal reasons, right, but for all of humanity. So just to not be thrown in with them, they do not consider themselves tantrikas.
Mm-hmm. For good reason, yeah. Otherwise, you would have hardly, as a gentleman, given room to such a simile in your letter, meaning the comparison would never have been made between masters and Tantra. One more word will suffice. The tantrikas, at least the modern sect, for more than 400 years have practiced rites and ceremonies, the description of which will never be attempted by the pen of one of our brotherhood.
Yeah, they are so disgusting. We don't even think about them, let alone try to describe them to somebody.
I cannot leave unnoticed the remark that your lack of progress has been due to the fact that you were not allowed to come to us and be taught personally.
Yeah, that was Hume's big complaint. Well, I offered to come to Tibet. I would have come there and you could have sat down and spent a month or 6 months teaching me everything. Well, who would want to spend even 1 hour with A.O. Hume?
Mr. Sinnett also wasn't given any such privilege, yet he seems to understand perfectly well whatever he is taught. And even,
that's not going to sit well.
And even the few hazy points upon subjects of an extremely abstruse nature will be soon cleared up for him. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Nor have we ever had one word of unpleasantness between us.
Yeah.
Wow. Not even between him and Morya, whose bluntness in speaking his mind is well known.
So, yeah, if there was any amity left between Sinnett and Hume, it's gone now, because now Hume's really going to be upset at Sinnett.
And since you bring up again the question of our supposed identity with the old lady, the question since days of yore, I will, with your permission, say a few words on this. Even now, you say that you're not sure that I am not Jwal Khul.
Maybe he's met Jwal Khul in person, but I'm not sure. He may not have.
You're not sure that I am not Jwal Khul, or a spirit of the high eastern plane.
Things that he obviously wrote in his letter.
The latter being an honor indeed after being suspected as a tantrika. Oh my gosh. Wow. My goodness. Therefore, you say that I, K.H., cannot honestly wonder at your doubts. No, I wonder at nothing, for I knew all this long ago. Someday, this and much more will be demonstrated by you objectively, subjective proof being no proof at all. More than once, I have been suspected by you of taking my impressions about you and other persons and things in the outside world from Alcott's and the old lady's heads.
Yeah, this is interesting because he's going to explain that there's actually some truth to that, but that's not how he makes his opinions.
No. Kindly give thought to the following law when alluding to my taking my ideas of you out of the old lady's head or Alcott's or anyone else's. It is a familiar saying that a well-matched couple grow together, so as to come to a close resemblance in features as well as in mind. But do you know that between adept and chela, master and pupil, there gradually forms a closer tie, for the psychic interchange is regulated scientifically, whereas between husband and wife, unaided nature is left to herself.
So, yeah, this is way more intimate than a relationship between a husband and wife who each have their own agendas. When you've got a Mahatma and a chela, both completely on the same page, both with one single objective, their minds and their beings merge more and more over time. As we've said, all of the members of the hierarchy are on a network. They each have a personality, and yet they have access to all of the experience, knowledge, wisdom of all other members of the network. And it's not just by manual communication, it's by tuning in and being with that person, being in their mind, seeing things the way they see them. Completely different from our very rudimentary forms of communication.
As the water in a full tank runs into an empty one which it is connected with, and as the common level will sooner or later be reached, so does the knowledge of the adept flow to the chela. That is such a cool analogy.
Yes.
And the chela attains the adept's level according to his receptive capacities. That's amazing. At the same time, the chela, being an individual, a separate evolution, unconsciously imparts to the master the quality of his accumulated mentality.
And that's why it's important for the chelas to have something to contribute, to be an expert in one or more areas of life, to have abilities that would contribute to their overall improvement. A common babu with nothing special about them doesn't have really anything to contribute.
That's also why the masters need to be so careful.
This is not an organization that anyone who applies and has just basic minimum abilities
And a fee.
will be invited to join. No, it's very, very exclusive. It has to be if you want to preserve the purity of it.
The master absorbs his knowledge, and if it is a question of language he does not know, the master will get the chela's linguistic tendencies just as they are, idioms and all, unless he takes the trouble to sift through and remodel the phrases when using them. Proof: Morya, who does not know English and has to use Alcott's or the old lady's language.
So, once again, we've several times heard that Morya doesn't speak English, and yet we've seen very, very long letters from him in English with nearly perfect grammar and expressions. How could he possibly do that? Exactly by this. He projects his thought usually into HPB's or Alcott's brain, and then sees and writes out, either him or one of his chelas, what it translates to. So a form of Google Translate, Mahatma Translate. It's absolutely amazing. So he can communicate in any language that one of the chelas that they work with knows.
So you see, it is quite possible for me to catch HPB's or any other chela's ideas about you without meaning to do you any injustice. Because whenever we find such ideas, unless they're not important, we never use them as they are found, but always ascertain independently for ourselves whether the ideas so reflected in us are right or wrong.
So even though they will see any opinions that they have,
they won't use them until they verify it for themselves.
Exactly, because it's very important to verify the validity of that opinion.
And now a few words about your letter on the 5th ultimo.
And by 5th ultimo, he probably meant the 5th of September.
However great the services provided by Mr. A.O. Hume in connection with his literary value, the president of the Eclectic has nevertheless done nothing whatever for his branch. Sting. You have dropped it out of your thoughts. Why? Oh, because he's just mad at the masters, I guess. That's what.
He thought it was beneath him to have to try to teach these people who, in his mind, were far inferior to him. Even though they were other English people, they weren't nearly as intelligent, nearly as devoted to the cause as he was. So he made no effort at all, really, to speak of, to keep the branch going, the Simla Eclectic.
You have dropped it out of your thoughts, my dear brother, from the beginning. All your energies were devoted to the comprehension of our philosophy and the knowledge and acquirements of our secret doctrine. You have done a good deal in this direction, and I thank you heartily. To understand the doctrine?
Well, remember, he had helped them by writing articles for the Theosophists. So he did make an effort and a good effort, and they've expressed their appreciation numerous times for that.
Yet no attempt was ever made to organize your branch on a firm foundation, not even regular meetings held. On the plea that you were not allowed to know all, you gave your fellows nothing. And since you say you appreciate sincerity, then I will say more.
He maybe shouldn't have said that he wants him to be sincere and honest.
Goodness. Many of the fellows of the Calcutta branch who complained that the president of the Eclectic, while leaving many a letter unanswered from fellows loyal and devoted to the cause, and paying little if any attention to his own branch, was known to hold a most friendly correspondence with one who is publicly and widely known as the greatest enemy of the founders, their slanderer, and the open opponent of the society.
So he didn't have time for the real members of the Theosophical Society who were part of the membership of the Simla Eclectic branch, but he did hang out with this one member who openly criticized everything about the founders and the Mahatmas.
I speak, as you already know, of S.K. Chatterjee, a man who has done more to injure the society and the cause than all the Calcutta papers put together. In one of your latest letters, you do me the honor to say that you firmly believe me a gentleman, incapable of an ungentlemanly act.
Now he's going to question whether or not that's true. He said that he is a gentleman in writing, but let's see whether he actually thinks that.
Last year, during a council meeting in your billiard room, and in the presence of several theosophists, when, through HPB, I advised you to offer S.K. Chatterjee to resign, since he entertained such a miserable opinion of the founders, you felt very indignant at the suggestion and declared publicly that I was no gentleman.
So he was watching psychically this conversation because he had told HPB to let him know, you probably should just resign if you really have such a miserable opinion of the founders of the organization. So in that conversation, he said that he thought he was no gentleman.
Wow. This little contradiction and change of opinion must not prevent me from telling you again that, had Chatterjee then and there been shown the necessity of resigning under Rules 16 and 17, the cause would not have suffered as it has, and he himself would not have appeared in the contemptible light of A, a traitor who forfeits his word of honor as a theosophist, B, an untruthful man deliberately telling falsehoods, and C, when he had finally left the society, a reviler of innocent persons.
So this is who Hume admired, apparently, enough to keep up an ongoing conversation with.
The harm he has done and the falsehoods he told are detailed in Mohini's letter to me, which I send you. That was probably enclosed in this letter as well.
Yes.
The fact alone that he accused someone who had seen him but once in her life, and long after he had joined, of confessing to him that the society had a political object, and that she had asked him to make a political program for her, shows you the man is a liar.
So this man, who had only met HPB one time, for whatever reason, was lying about her and said she had a political motive in founding the society. She was often accused of being a spy for Russia, which was the most ludicrous thing you could imagine if you knew the whole situation. She didn't even think very highly of the Russian government. The supposed fact that she was a spy of the Russian government is unbelievable.
If he has a letter to that effect from HPB, why does he not produce it? You may, if you like, regard me once more as no gentleman, but when I read the letter he wrote to you in which he speaks of the disintegration of the Calcutta Society and makes other false suggestions, I wondered that a man of your ability and discrimination, who undertakes to fathom that which no uninitiate has ever fathomed, should be so taken in by an ambitious and vain little man who succeeded in striking the right chord in your heart and plays upon it ever since.
Yeah, he's playing you for a fool.
Wow. Yes, he was once upon a time an honest, sincere man. He has some good qualities in him that may be called redeeming qualities. With all that, he has shown that in order to achieve an object and gain advantage over those he hates more than the founders, if that's possible, he could also lie and resort to dishonorable actions. But enough of him, who is mentioned here simply in connection with your resignation as president of the Eclectic.
Ah. So now Hume has resigned after that last letter put him over the edge, and he's like, okay, I'm out of here. I resigned my office of president of the Simla Eclectic, and I'm going to go take up with this other guru who's going to teach me some real philosophy.
For when the Chauhan and Morya, after repeatedly calling my attention to the fact that great harm was done to the cause by Chatterjee's vilifications, and by his boasting that he was supported by the president of the Eclectic himself, whom he would force to quit that society of humbugs and myths, told me that it was high time that something should be done to stop such a state of things. I had to confess that they were right and I was wrong. It was I, certainly, who suggested to Mr. Sinnett the advisability of such a change, and I'm glad you liked the idea. You prefer, as you tell me, to be simply a zealous though independent theosophist, a simple member of the society with whose objects, however faulty the system, you sympathize from the bottom of your heart. And Mr. Sinnett is nevertheless perfectly willing to work with us, without his loyalty ever wavering. Thus, everyone feels he is in his right place. Of course, no honest man could associate with us once he felt a conviction that our system was quite wrong, and one, moreover, who believes, as you do, that since we broach some theories to which you cannot subscribe, you should not trouble yourself even about that portion of our philosophy which is true. If I had any intention of arguing, I might perhaps remark that the latter is an easy way of suppressing all the sciences and religious systems, for there is not one in which false facts and unproven theories do not abound. But I prefer to drop the matter. To close, I may frankly confess that I rejoice to find you believing that, as an independent member of the society, you shall probably be more useful and more able to do good than you have hitherto been. I rejoice, but I can't help thinking that many a change will yet occur in you before you find yourself finally settled into your ideas. Pardon me, dear brother, I don't want to cause you pain, but such is my opinion, and I abide by it. Wow.
This next one is kind of funny.
You asked me to get the old lady to refrain from proposing you for the council. I don't believe there is the slightest danger of her doing it. I know, in fact, that she is the last person in the world to propose you now. Rightly or wrongly, she feels herself injured by you to the very root of her heart. And I am bound to confess that, no doubt unwillingly, you have hurt her feelings very deeply on several occasions. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, permit me to sign myself your obedient servant. Whenever you need me, and when you're done studying with the Swami, then I will again be at your service. Really? Really?
Oh, he's absolutely serious.
He would be willing to take him back?
Yeah.
My goodness.
That's what I say. They never, ever give up on someone. Go do whatever you think you have to do, and if that person doesn't come through for you and you reconsider and think, you know what, I threw away a really good opportunity. We don't hold grudges. They don't. They absolutely do not hold a grudge. So we can do the same thing, I hope. Yours faithfully, KH, he signed it. So that's the end, basically, of communications with A.O. Hume, since he didn't come back and say, you know what, I was wrong.
But so the remaining of our letters in the book are to Sinnett alone.
Right. Hume had this amazing opportunity, and he wanted to argue and debate everything. and he threw it away to go hook up with some Swami who was going to teach him how to produce phenomena.
Goodness.
We'll see what happens there.
So unfortunate.
Maybe he will learn how to make teacups appear. I don't know.
That'll help humanity, for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, really interesting stuff here. We hear from two chelas, HPB and Ramaswamier, who had the amazing opportunity to see them in the flesh. A.O. Hume and Sinnett both would have had opportunities at different times to see them in one way or another if they had just been in the right frame of mind and not creating havoc. Remember when Sinnett returned from London and his wife and child stayed there, he lived with Hume for several months. And HPB actually came and visited for several weeks, and they both were extremely mean to her. Hume especially basically emotionally tortured her. And he's reminding him of that, how badly he treated her. And he has been nothing but demeaning with HPB. So even with all of that, they never hold a grudge and tell people, if you get your act together, let's keep trying. Try, try, try. That's their mantra. And we need to keep doing the same. Never, ever give up. Well, session 55, another exciting one. Mm-hmm. Shall we keep going? Not on this session, but next session, 56.
Yeah. We need to see how this all culminates, for sure.
Yes, we do. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we will see you hopefully in session number 56, and thank you for coming along on this very interesting journey.
Mm-hmm. Wow.